Hey, everybody, and welcome to an episode of the Partner Up podcast. I'm Sergio.
And I'm Kimberly.
And Kimberly, today we're actually going to be responding to a comment from YouTube.
We are.
So we have Melanie who commented, hey, it'd be great if you guys can talk about how you navigated the interview process after graduation. Also, how you were able to manage all these side projects with also having a full-time job. I'd also love to hear your thoughts on the job market right now for software engineers and how you think we'll be able to push things through. So I think there's a lot of stuff there that both you and I can answer, and then some stuff that we can both weigh in on individually.
Yeah. We should probably go in order so we can stay on task. We'll just go everywhere if I know ourselves.
All right, so let's go with navigating the interview process. Let's pick that first part of the comment there.
I didn't get a tech job right after college, but I can speak to my experience at least with like getting a job after college, and then I think you could focus in on more like the tech side. Mm-hmm. So for me, I had an internship during college for the company I worked for right after college for like 5 years after, and I remember it was my junior year. I went to a job interview fair in college, and I was just walking around. I was in business school. I think I said that in the first episode when we talked about our backgrounds. I was in business school, and I remember going because I remember seeing it was a large retail company. I don't think I've ever name dropped them just yet. I probably will eventually, but it was a big retail company, and I was going to school for business, and they were just there like recruiting students, and I remember going and being like, oh, this looks interesting. I didn't really shop at this place. I didn't really, I don't know. I wasn't one of those girls that shopped at that place. And I were just going and thinking like, okay, like this is really popular. The pay seems not too bad. Let's go. And the interview process was a long time. It was the fall of my junior year. And then I got the internship, obviously, did a couple of phone interviews. And then I started the following year, like in the
just
summer.
Phone interviews? You didn't have to go on site or anything?
Interviews. Yeah, just phone interviews because I was based in San Antonio and the internship was going to be in McAllen.
Oh, okay.
So
not even a Zoom call or something?
No, there was no Zoom back then because this was like, I'm going to age myself. This was like 2015?
Okay.
2015, I think, when I did the interviews, and then I had the internship in 2016, right before you and I started dating. So I had the internship. It was an HR-focused one. And then I kind of got lucky because as soon as I finished the internship, maybe about a month later, while I was in the internship, they offered me an extended internship, which basically gave me the opportunity to work for them still while I was going to school. So I got to get like some more money. And I actually had another job. I worked at the library during the school year. Mm-hmm. So I had 2 jobs during my senior year, which as a business major, I took all my art classes my junior year. So my senior year, when I went into this time, it wasn't too bad having the 2 jobs. It was a lot of working weekends anyways. And then I closed when I was in the library during the week, and then I would work weekends for my internship. It was a lot of work. Mm-hmm. As soon as like I started the extended internship, that's when they called and they offered me a job in McAllen. Because I already did my extended internship in San Antonio when I went to school. And yeah, then I started. And that was it. It was because of the internship and because it went well, I had a job, and that's pretty much the extent of it.
Well, I think I had a pretty similar experience except for phone calls. So I was stationed in the Valley as well mm-hmm. for my internship. So when I was a senior, I believe it was a senior. So I've always had work-study jobs. But when I was a senior is when I got my internship that was outside of school. Mm-hmm. The thing about work-study jobs is that they give you an award, and it's the work-study award, and it's $1 amount.
Oh,
right?
Wow. I didn't have that.
So that's how work-study works. It's technically a scholarship. So once you get this work-study award, then they pay you that scholarship as a paycheck. So you have to go into the school. The school has like work-study employers. Sometimes they're like affiliated with the school. Mm-hmm. They're not necessarily in the school.
Like outside contracts?
Yeah. Like you might have like an outside contractor that works with the school that has work study award to give to students. So they'll be like certified for it or whatever. But either way, like you're working for that. So that means usually you get to work for about as much as your award goes through the whole year. So your wage that you actually get is usually bare minimum, so that award can last the whole well semester, right?
wow.
Or for because you get 2 awards, you get the work study for fall, work study for what is it?
Spring.
So the thing is, the way it works is whoever's the work study person, they put in 1/3 of the work study salary, and then the grant gives you the other 2/3. So if you think about this, like for every $1 that they put in, the government is putting in $2. So they're making up the difference.
Oh, I went to a private college, so maybe that's why my work study was a little bit different.
Yeah,
Because I don't remember being like that. But maybe it was.
because there was direct hire and work study. If you were direct hire, that means that for every hour that they had to pay you, they had to pay all $3. But if you were work study, the person who was hiring you only had to pay $1 out of the $3. If that makes sense. So I got that award, and I was able to get it through my entire 4 years there at the university. So I work study in the university. I worked initially as a social media manager for the student union. Then from there, I moved on to be working as sort of an IT help desk. And then I got my award as the actual internship. So I got an email, and that email was like, hey, everybody in the engineering department, we have this company. They're called, well, now they're called Kemper, but back in the time they were called Infinity Insurance. So we have this company called Infinity Insurance that would like to hire some engineers. If you guys or anybody who's interested in this engineering internship opportunity, let us know. And I was like, well, I always preferred the job like inside the school because I could like run to class and run back and all that stuff. And this was a full internship,
Like a job. You had to go to a location.
which means that it paid more. So I wasn't going to be earning minimum wage anymore. So my work study job paid $7.25 an hour. Right, so that's rough. And then you would get pay bumps accordingly, right? Just like you would with anything else, but it's so your award doesn't, because like think about it, you go in, you're only allotted a certain amount. If they pay you minimum wage, it could last all semester. If they pay you extra, then your award might run out sooner. And then if the department wants to keep you, then they have to pay for whatever's missing from the grant or from the award. So for me, the appeal for getting into an internship rather than work study was that
You can just keep your
salary.
money. Yeah, that's
It's a larger amount because I mean, you could at this point you could make more work going and working at a Target or something.
Yeah.
Right. And at that point, I still could have been making more working at a Target or something. But the thing is, the benefit of being in school, work study comes with certain expectations that they're going to let you work and study at the same time. That's what that means. So I think at that point, since I was a senior in college, junior, freshman, sophomore, all that, the benefit of just being in school, working, and being able to dash in and out of classes outweighed the salary. But I mean, we were struggling. Who isn't in the valley, right? We were struggling with finances, and I always helped that at home. So once I was a senior, I'm like, well, I think it's time to start looking for things.
Yeah.
So not only was I looking out for jobs related to my degree. So for example, at that point, I was already computer engineering, software track, and everything. But I needed to start looking for a real job, not just it's Google or the FANG companies, right? I needed to find something in case none of those people hired me.
Yeah.
So I'm like, might as well get this internship with the local insurance company and see what's about.
Yeah.
So I sent in an email. I didn't think they were going to get it, but I thought, might as well just in case as a backup. And lo and behold, I got that. Like they called me and brought me into an interview, and they're like, "Can you tell us about your experience and everything?" I'm like, "Well, I've been using a computer since I was literally 4. I have a pretty good story about my history with computers.
Yeah.
And I mean, every time I went into that interview, because there was a couple of rounds, they have an assessment, and they're like, "Oh my God, you were like 2 points away from getting a manager score."
Oh.
And I was like, "Oh well."
You've always been
cool.
like well ahead of everybody else.
I guess. At that point, it was the first test that you go in. It's like an assessment, and then after that, you go in, and then they read you as a person to see if they would like to work with you. So I talked with them. They're like, "Oh yeah, no, we have this system," and I remember they were hiring us as data analysts for their sales department. So they had this online cloud integration platform that they wanted to make more efficient for sales. Mm-hmm. So they're like, "That's what we're hiring you guys to come on board. We have an offsite team in Alabama that's going to be training you guys on it, and that's really what we're looking for." So it was me and another friend of mine, and I didn't even know that he was applying, but he applied, and we both got the internship, and we went from there. So at that point, I was still in school, so it was still like the beginning of my senior year when I got that internship, and I was able to drive back and forth from school. So like I would get like a super early morning shift. I don't have to get all my classes in the afternoon. But at that point, I was making better money, not even salary, just hourly. Mm-hmm. But yeah, that internship actually turned into a full-time offer actually not even after I graduated, like towards the end of my senior year. Yeah. I was already full-time.
I remember that.
And they were just being like, "Oh, we're going to put you remotely. So just go to work go to school. And then whenever you're in lunch or something, just sign in with your work laptop, send us a notification, and we'll put in your hours for a full-time position." And I was like, sweet. So I was able to be working in college campus.
Wow.
With remote work. So it was a really sweet setup until I graduated.
Yeah.
And I think I worked there for maybe 6 months after.
Like not even until you got your other job.
Until I got my other job. But for me, I think a core tenet of my career progression has been always to look for another job while you have a job. It is less stressful. It is just in every point of view much better to be searching for a new job, a better opportunity while you're currently supported.
Yeah, I think because like I was gonna say, like kind of just to hone in back, like I remember still looking for other jobs when I was in college. I didn't interview because like when you have a job, you kind of get a little bit, when you have like an offer lined up, you get a little bit lazy or like complacent. So not saying I regret taking that job, because I feel like I learned a lot, not just about work, but about myself. And of course I met one of my best friends in that career. But I still was looking for another job. So just like to see what was out there, but it was hard because there were so many people competing for the same things, and you get almost intimidated. Like, oh, like, am I worthy of applying for these like big companies, especially straight out of college? A lot of companies, I think big companies want straight out of college kids because they're moldable, aka cheaper than like, not gonna lie, than some of these like more experienced people. So it's kind of it's pros and cons, because you can go and learn something, but they're also gonna kind of maybe take advantage and not pay you as much as like some other places would pay, like somebody who has the same work ethic as you, but maybe just not as much experience.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think at that point, when you're hiring straight out of college, you're hiring to bring on board somebody that doesn't come with any habits yet. Because like once you hire somebody else, they have their previous job experiences give them a way of working that they're used to.
Yeah.
So then you have to adapt them and give them onboarding time to kind of adapt to the way your company grows and works every day. So when you bring somebody from fresh out of college, more than likely they don't have a whole lot of experience, which is a problem, and we've talked about before. But they're eager to learn, and they'll work with you. So they'll adapt to whatever process you have, and they usually won't put up any resistance to it.
Yeah. And I think, people, you have to go in, and I think a mistake we made in our emails is that we put the year we were born, but people don't really like I have like 94, you have 95, and people don't realize that sometimes that's a negative thing, because they'll judge you for your age no matter like how far along you are in your career. So go in, and sometimes I remember people telling me, like, after I graduated, they told me you should never tell them you just graduated. You try not to put the year you graduated, just that you did graduate. I think you've mentioned that, and other people I know have mentioned that.
Yeah, you don't mention. I mean, I remember my parents would tell us that like you had to put a headshot in your portfolio.
Oh yeah, when before.
When you were in your resume, so like they could see who you were. And
That's
also,
crazy.
don't do that. You don't want to put that. You don't want to put age. You don't want to put where you're from. You do want to put address. I remember that. One of my tips that someone gave me is, hey, if you're looking for a job in a specific city, put your address as that specific city.
Yeah.
Unless you're looking for relocation bonuses, right?
Yeah.
So if you're applying for like Google or some of these FANG companies that offer relocation bonuses, and usually they'll take you at your merit.
Yeah.
But usually a whole lot of the companies, they're not open to relocation bonuses, and they'll give preference to locals. So if they see somebody who's applying who already lives in Austin or already lives in LA or wherever you're applying to, they'll give that. So I remember I reached out to one of my friends from Austin, and I was like, hey, can I use your address? I'm applying to a bunch of like places, and I would love to just be able to have an Austin address there so that they can not be biased against me.
Yeah.
And it worked. That's when I got my other offer after, my intern turned a job out of college.
Yeah. And like I mentioned earlier, it's intimidating, but I think the one thing to remember is that you having a certain degree, especially like a sought after engineering, computer science degree, not that any degree is good, right? But I think those degrees, like, you know your worth. Like, know that these companies will look out for you, because sometimes it's, in some markets, I think it's not as popular to have a certain type of degree, like an engineering degree. A lot of what you find is like people who are self-taught. But some companies, not all of them, want people who have had the experience of going to school and like learning from, their professors, or like taking time to study it. And I think that's also like high value for them too.
Yeah.
So lots of people like that.
Yeah, I agree. And well, moving on to the next topic, you said, how are you able to manage all these side projects along with having a full-time job?
That's a totally separate topic. So I'm glad you moved us on. But I think really that perspective should come from you, because you've been the one that's like kind of spearheaded all these side projects, and I've kind of just been moved along. When I had my previous HR job and even my government job, I didn't do any side projects with you at all, because like the time, like the commute, I think was really what the killer was. So if you have a commute, you can still get it done. You can still have side projects when you have a commute, but it's so helpful to be remote. And I think like you can speak more to this.
I wasn't doing anything while I was like remote. Like, it wasn't like, I was working remote and therefore I had more time because I could be at work and do these other things. In the beginning, it was more like, okay, I really wanted to go work for Google. I interviewed at Google a couple times, but it's a tough interview process.
Yeah.
I interviewed for Google straight up like 4 times. For different parts. I interviewed for the Android department. I interviewed for the audio department. I interviewed for the maps department, like a bunch of different parts in Google. And I always made it to the last phase. I got to go on site. They flew me in. I was able to go through that. But there's always like this riddle format questions in computer engineering, right? Well, they'll be like, all right, it's not even just like your typical like reverse a binary tree. It's like, okay, let's say you have this problem. How would you solve it? And then you'd like talk through them through the solution. Be like, I think this is the way we should do it. And they're like, okay, cool. So then how would you start implementing the problem? And then you talk to them through your technical implementation of the solution. And then go, okay, cool. Now start writing it down. I'm like, cool. So you start writing down the solution, and you have 45 minutes to do all that together. So my problem was I could never do that fast enough.
Yeah. And in real life, that doesn't happen. You have more time.
Right. And there are always these coding like puzzles. They're not like Now they've gotten better over time, but before it was straight up puzzles that you would have to solve.
Yeah.
And it was just to like prove your Houdini-ness with code. And I never necessarily liked that because on the job, I would ask myself, like, when are you going to be using like dynamic programming to solve a problem? Like maybe Google, yeah, you're going to be doing that, but it's not going to be your entry level engineers straight out of college who are going to jump out. Like, no, that doesn't happen.
Higher level.
Yeah, there's no way you're going to grab somebody straight out of college and then put them on that, right? I understand that you want to see potential, that they know these high level things, and there's a really high bar, but you're making them go through this show and dance to prove themselves to you, and I never liked that. Like, just like as a person, like being in that hot seat and being just, you feel at the mercy of this other person, whether this person vibes with you or not, or if they like you or not.
Yeah.
Or just like, oh, well, you went through this entire process and this one puzzle that this engineer personally handpicked, you just didn't know it. Therefore, the entire process is now ruined because you had a bad day with one engineer. That to me was never fun. But one thing I knew was all this is just to de-risk you as a candidate. They wanted to see that if they hired you, you would be and you would have the capacity to do what they were expecting you to do. So I know Google worked like that, but I started noticing as I went into interviews that not everybody had the same type of interview. Like the interview at the internship was nothing like that. Yeah. They literally came in and they're like, hey, this is what we do day to day. Can you tell us about like what you have done that is relevant to this? And then I would answer that. And it was a lot more straight to like the job type of questions. So I started Googling, and I always did a whole lot of YouTubing. I've always learned through YouTube, and everybody says you got to prove that you know how to do things. So during college, what I did is I would have like a sort of freelance company with my dad. Mm-hmm. So we would make software for insurance companies, not the same kind of insurance that I was working at, just like life insurance, like accounting shops would need like Ethernet run through their offices and just like random little tech gigs here and there. So I would do those so I could build up a resume, a portfolio, and then I'd be able to say on my resume that from inside of school, I was working as a freelance technician that did Ethernet network communications. I would be setting up operating systems. I would be setting up LAN networks for their front system. I would be doing website design for some office. I was doing front end, back end design, hardware support, all this sort of different things that would show a variety of skills that I could then go and market. So eventually I started narrowing down on that, and I wanted to go into work in Google. And Google was my goal at the time. So I'm like, okay, I need to get more projects that are Google-esque. Google's a bunch of apps. So I started learning how to code apps and started making projects to prove to potential employers that I knew how to build apps.
And that's like our whole other episode on those.
Exactly. So if you don't have the experience, you make the experience. That's what I got from that point in my life. Mm-hmm. And somebody saw the short where I said that, but didn't go into depth about it. And they're like, oh, so you mean just fraud? I'm like, no, I actually went and got paid for the work that I did as a freelance technician. Mm-hmm. That is a job. Yeah. And it goes back to your imposter syndrome thing that you were saying, that you felt like you weren't good enough to get hired by these potential companies. I'd be like, okay, I need to put a line on here that says I did it. And I need to feel like I own this, because if you can't, like, if you don't feel that you're worth something, your interviewer is going to pick up on that. Yeah. So step number one, you have to like fake it until you make it. If you don't believe it, just at least pretend that you own these. But I made sure to at least be able to put these bullet points on my resume that I could actually describe and fall back on and say, yeah, this is what I did during that time. And these are the real things that I did. So another thing that I did is I made an app for the McAllen Chamber of Commerce, right? So it was right before the pandemic, but we built this whole event app and we talked with them. We were going to their chamber meetings on the weekend. I wasn't on the weekends. I think it was on Saturdays. I don't remember, but it was like one day a month. We'd all go in, and then eventually the chamber and they're like, "Hey, we want to make this app, and we want to make it for our local events that we do, and we want to have people be able to check in and sign up because right now we're doing it with pen and paper." I'm like, "Cool, let's do it." And not only did I publish an app for the App Store, I did it for a client. Mm-hmm. So that shows a higher level of responsibility. And I kept going, and I kept going, and I keep making more projects. And then I guess that's sort of what got me into like startup mode. Because then I realized, I can make these projects. I can make the apps.
Yeah.
So how does Netflix become Netflix? How does, Uber become Uber? And I started like researching more on them. And they're like, they were literally just like me, like straight out of college. They had an idea and then they published it. I'm like, cool. 2 birds, 1 stone. Let me try to make this project that I can use as social proof with employers that I know how to code. And at the same time, I might be able to leverage some of these as an actual project, and maybe I won't need a job. Yeah. I can just fund myself from these projects.
That's the goal.
That was the dream. Yeah.
Still a dream.
So I proceeded to make iPark, which was a parking system for universities. I made BarHop, which was an app for organizing drink tabs at bars, multiple bars. You wouldn't have to open and close tabs. We made Concession, which was a pivot on that same app that gets you concessions without you having to get up from a concert seat. And now Fixie, which is basically Uber for roadside assistance. And we'll be talking more about that later. But essentially all of these different projects were me picking up new skills so I can show potential employers that I could do the things they needed. So the iPark project that I did was so I could learn like just basic Android apps and Google Maps usage, real time, databases and whatnot. So once I did that, then I need to learn how to process money. So I that's when I started BarHop, and I actually learned how to use the Stripe SDK. So the first app taught me how to make an Android app and use a database. I still didn't know how to like acquire money. Like that app was an app that worked, but it didn't charge you anything.
Yeah.
I just wanted to sell it to the school, right? And then have an offline transaction, and then just all the students can use it for free. But BarHop is when I learned to integrate these third-party backend services. So now, not only did I learn how to make a front-end app with a third-party database support in the backend, now when I went into BarHop, I had to learn how to integrate a backend that the front-end app would communicate back and forth. So now I needed to learn how to architecture a tech stack, and I learned how to do all of that with BarHop. And then when we pivoted over to BarHop and Concession, I learned how to do that better, right? So now I learned that's when I learned how to actually tap into the hardware of the phone, because BarHop had the QR code scanner, which I was told that, and I'm still salty about that, people will never use QR codes to order food on the restaurant. It's too tedious. So still salty about that one. But either way, I that's the next skill that I picked up there. And then finally over in Fixie, I just basically put it all together and architected it better.
Yeah.
At that point, I would say that the skill that I learned for Fixie is a team. We actually developed that as a team. It was more people management rather than coding or hardware or anything, all of that.
Yeah. So like to bring it back to like how do you time manage these side projects with a full-time job? I'm not going to lie. I sacrificed a lot of sleep. Like, I wanted to play video games with the boys, and at the same time, I wanted to do this. So I would come home, I would eat, every Friday I would have a movie night with my family. And then once we finished, I'd go and start working on this. Like, at some point, I had to learn about delayed gratification, right? Mm-hmm. So people
success follows people who are willing to prolong not happiness, but like immediate gratification the longest.
Like completion of your goal.
Mm-hmm. So around this time, I had a little bit of a fallout with my friends. So the same people who I would play video games with or play League of Legends with, like they just weren't in my life anymore. And when I did that, I'm like, well, that I have the time that I used to play just staying up till 4 a.m. playing video games with my friends. Now I can use that same time to just learn these skills. So I would just use that time. Like it was literally the same amount of time I would spend early evening with my family, and then when everybody went to bed because they had school or something the next day, I'm famously a night owl, so I would stay up till 4 a.m. just like Googling, YouTubing, and like trying to make this app work. Yeah. I would be managing, because just project management on its own is difficult. Like learning GitHub, learning Git, and version control is difficult. So for the large part of that, it's like just how do I keep this code universal in storage? How do I keep it on the web and the cloud so I don't have to like keep it on this computer, and then I can go to work and I don't have to worry about where it goes. So there was just a lot of learning, and it was time then, because I didn't have that group of friends anymore. I kind of felt bad about playing video games because it just reminded me of those friends. Yeah. So I just basically swapped that time out that I would use playing video games to learn these skills. And I did sacrifice, sleep, going out with my friends, doing those things to learn this skill set. And I basically delayed that gratification because I could just picked up the game and played by myself and just, coped that way. But I didn't. Instead, I chose to learn. And a little bit came as like a grudge. I always use like anger or things that bother me as motivation to move forward. Mm-hmm. So I was like, well, you know what? They made their choice, and whatever happened between us, happened. I'll show them. Yeah. So I use that as motivation to learn as much as I can and make sure that I was successful.
Yeah. So. And I remember being your significant other during that time, because we were together for almost 9 years. It'll be 9 years this year we've been together. I think 9. Yeah, it's been 9. And so I remember we wouldn't necessarily go out. I mean, we also didn't have a lot of money at the time. We'd go to Applebee's and that was our fun time. We would spend time. You would take me to the Chamber of Commerce events, or you would take me to, meetings that you would have with these companies or these people you try to work with. Or I would you'd be working on your computer and I would you'd put something forensic files on it for me, and I would just be there and I'd fall asleep or, have to go to work later on. So I remember seeing that's the time that we had, or the things we wanted to do, we also didn't necessarily get to do them because we got to spend time together, which was nice. But you do things that you're trying to reach your goals for together, whether the person's just there with you or working with you doing it.
Yeah, that sort of makes a call back to the name of the podcast, Partner Up, right? Because it made a difference that I had you as a partner during that time than anybody else, right? That I was dating you because you're very supportive of everything I did. You were never just thinking about that. You have a full-time job and a girlfriend. Where is the time, right? Where I would go with my laptop to your house and then we'd watch Netflix or whatever, and then you'd fall asleep and I'd be on my computer on the little desk that you had in the corner. Yeah. And I would just keep going because I needed to figure out how this specific thing worked. Yeah. But I would go and I spend time with you. We'd watch whatever we were watching, and then once you knocked out, then I would stand up and go and keep coding away. But in not ones where you're not spending enough time with me, or you spend so much time on this project instead of spending time with me. You were never one of those types of girlfriends ever. You're always how can I help? What's the thing that I could do to make life easier? And that was a world of help. And eventually is what got me to say yes and put a ring on it.
Yes. Yeah, because, you have to support each other. Because, I think the equivalent of that for you, but maybe not as big of a scale, because I think, working with your partner or like trying to support them in like their long-term goals is like your long-term goals, short-term goals are different. And I think like I didn't necessarily have long-term goals like gosh, I can't speak right now. Goals, and then trying to enunciate here. Okay. Long-term goals like you did. I had a lot of short-term goals. You would always wake up early and go see me do my races. Like that's the only comparison I could think of. Even though like, you know, the goals you were working towards are very different than the goals I was working towards. Like we were both just very supportive of each other. Mm-hmm. And I think that's like one of the keys is like, how do you time manage with side projects while having a full-time job is having supportive partner, family, and friends.
That's right.
You know, I think that's one of the big key factors besides like your own motivation, your own like self-drivenness. That's like one of the key factors. That's like why we started this podcast, I think, was like, because like I mentioned before, like this was your idea and I was supportive of you. And this is one of our side projects. This isn't just, you know, this is a side project that we're doing. So we're talking about doing side projects. This is one of them. And I try to be as supportive as I can. And that's super important.
One piece of advice that I'd also say is always make sure that it fits within your routine. So like if you're wanting to learn how to do something, right? Mm-hmm. Figure out the holes in your routine and how to make it work. Because if it's uncomfortable to do it, then it's not going to get done.
Yeah.
So this podcast, for example, it takes us about 30 minutes to an hour to sit down and just record. And we're just having a conversation.
Yeah.
And then all the tools that we have to edit and publish are very easy to use. It takes like 20 minutes to edit and push out this podcast because the format that we chose is a dialogue. Mm-hmm. The type of editing that we do is minimalistic. All if anything, I mean, it's all this equipment that is the most difficult thing to set up. But once it's set up, it's set it and forget it. You just push a button and it records and everything's done for you.
Yeah.
And luckily I'm techie, so I don't think setting up this equipment is difficult at all. It's just it's putting things in its place and then it's done. But that's definitely been a key driver for me. Like I need to find a place in my everyday life or a slot that it feels comfortable for me to work on this side project. Yeah. So right now I'm still currently working on pushing out apps. So when do I develop these apps? Well, it's usually after you and I have spent enough time during the day, spent time without Elia, and then everybody goes to sleep. I'm not tired. I'm not sleepy. I'm still a night owl. So then I go up and I keep working upstairs. Sometimes, I mean, we keep the tradition going of me working on my computer, and behind me I have a pull-out couch that you and Ardelia knock out on.
Yeah.
So it's just making it work with your life. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because the hardest part is to do it. If you're not doing it, if you're not making small incremental progress towards it, you're never going to get it done. So just get started and go and just do it. Get started. Don't let your dreams be dreams.
Yes. Any progress I think is progress, even if it's small little steps.
And let's talk about the last portion of this.
Yes. Back to the job market, job section.
Yeah. So I'd also love to hear your thoughts about the job market right now for software engineers and how you think we'll be able to push through.
So I think both of us have experience in being, laid off from a company. And unfortunately for me, also this is kind of weird because I just had a baby. But I didn't get a job after I was laid off. You were able to get a job after you were laid off, thank goodness. I think it's hard, and I've been hearing people say that the job market is really bad. I don't know because I've been looking still, but I'm not even 7 weeks postpartum yet, so it's a little difficult for me right now to think about that while I'm trying to survive and keep her alive. But I think it's scary. Not to put any fear in anybody, but it is concerning, because they had this big tech bubble, what it was called, and it burst. But something that one of my old mentors told me on my old job was that this happens. This is a cycle. This isn't a new thing. She had been in tech since the 90s when this was all kind of getting started. Not getting started because tech's been around for, a little while. It wasn't as popular. She said this has happened before. She said she can she was laid off. She didn't know how many times because this happens a lot. Mm-hmm. It's a big cycle. We just feel it now more, I think, because of social media and because of all like the big names in tech and how sensationalized it is. But like this is a cycle. You have to just push through. You have to just keep, kind of like what you were talking about, the side projects. You have to keep at it. Same thing with like if you want to get a tech job, any type of job, you just kind of push through it. You don't give up. You know, I know people who were laid off even before I was, and they've applied for over like 1,000 jobs, and they're still going at it. And they're, you know, they're making it their own. They're reaching out to their community. They're going to events for, you know, the tech startup, you know, week or you know, tech conferences. They're going to that and they're putting themselves out there. I think that's super important for when you're trying to get known in a community, because you don't think about this, but tech is a community. Like, you know, people. Like when I had my job, I would meet people that knew other people from like other positions, and like it was like a community. Like, oh, hey, I knew this person from my previous job, or my 2 jobs ago, I knew this person. And you overlap a lot. I remember you would go to events and you would meet people who knew like my boss or people who I worked with.
That's right.
Because you would talk about, oh, this is where my wife works and she works in this area. Oh, I know the director. I know this manager there. So you have to be a part of the community. This isn't just like, oh, I'm going to stay in my little corner in my remote world. Like, yeah, you can do that. But if you want to like really make a stake in the game, you have to be a part of the community, this tech community, whether it's virtual or in person. Like, you have to be a part of that, make your stamp.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of the issues that we're seeing right now is because of some positions are remote. I'm lucky enough to have a job that is still somewhat remote. The engineers are just very secluded, very kept to themselves.
Yeah.
And in a remote environment, you have to be over-expressive. Like, even if you're introverted, you need to make sure that you're making an effort in showing across that you're able to communicate despite a remote environment.
Yeah.
So initially, I started off as an engineer. And I went engineer, and I went through multiple progressions as an engineer. But eventually, I got up to a people management role, which is a manager. So now I can give some insights from like the hiring side of things.
Yeah.
And I want to say, like, when you're number one is you just got to keep applying. That, like, there's no ifs, ands, or about it. You got to just apply every day to as many jobs as you can possibly see.
Yep.
Because it's a numbers game. You just got to get lucky once. So just keep on applying, keep taking interviews. But 2, also like know the quality of the interviews. Not every interview is the same. So the way it works from a hiring standpoint, I have a role that needs to get filled. So if I'm the manager and I need to hire an engineer, what I'm going to do is I'm going to call to HR. I'm going to get a certain amount of budget approved. They're going to approve it, and then they're going to get one of 2 things. They're going to get either their internal HR to like put up the post and start collecting resumes, or 2, they're going to go to an agency, and then the agency is going to start trying to bring in hires.
Yeah.
Once you get your stack of resumes, the type of interview process that it goes, it's either in an individual basis or it's going to be in a pool of candidates. That's important.
Yeah.
So whenever you get in an interview or you get a call from a recruiter, because it goes like this: you apply for a job. If you get lucky and you get a call back from a recruiter, they're going to call you back and then they're going to try to sell you on the company. That's dumb because you applied because you need a job.
Yeah.
So I don't think they need to sell you on that. What I always made a point is at that point, ask that recruiter, what type of interview style is this going to be going? And they're going to be like, what? What do you mean? You're going to say, is this a pool of candidates or is it a one candidate at a time? And then they're going to be like, oh, well, that's interesting. And then they'll tell you the real answer.
Yeah. Because
what's going to happen is in a ranked process, they're going to grab a bunch of stack of resumes. They're going to find the best match. And they're going to put it at the top. And then they're going to give it to the hiring manager. And the hiring manager is going to look at the stack. And they're not going to look through every single resume. They're going to say, oh, this is the best candidate that you were able to find me. I agree. Or no, I don't agree. If they don't agree, they'll move on to the next one. And if they agree, they'll say, cool, let's set up an interview with them. And then at that point, you're basically disqualifying yourself. They're having this interview to determine whether or not you're the right candidate. But the key thing is that they're interviewing you in this specific interview style, and you're not competing against anybody else. You're competing against yourself. At this point, they're going in to see, why shouldn't we hire this person? Because they already weighed you against all the other candidates, and your resume came out on top. Now they're either doing that with AI or they're doing that with whatever tools that they have. But the important thing is that in that particular style, you were already the top candidate. So when you call and you ask, hey, is this a pool of candidates or am I being considered on a lone basis? Know that when they say, oh, we're just considering on a personal basis, know that you are the top candidate. Now you're actively disqualifying yourself. That's the goal of the interview process, to figure out why we shouldn't hire you. If you're in a pool of candidates, I will tell you, just don't get your hopes up.
Those are rough.
Yeah, those are rough because at that point there was no guarantee that all this other structure took place behind. All they said is that these are the 10 best candidates, and you don't know where in the rankings you stand. There might be somebody that went and actually worked for Google and got laid off, and now they're applying for the same position that you are with very limited experience. So if you get and they answer, oh yeah, we have a pool of candidates, we're gonna do our rounds of interviews. Then just go in, give it your best shot, but take it more as an approach of building experience and interviews. If you're like a nervous interviewer or whatnot, that's your opportunity to like grow and learn how to interview better.
And ask for feedback, I think, is important. From like, if you don't get it, or even if you get it, you should ask for feedback, I think.
I always ask for feedback. They're never going to email you back and tell you we didn't hire you because of this. Never. So one thing I always do I did in every one of my interviews when I was trying to get a job is I would say, what does the ideal candidate look like in this position? And then they'll tell you things that they're looking for. And then you can ask them a question like, cool. So then how would you you just got to wordsmith it a little bit. There's no script. Well, at least I don't use a script, but I would always ask a question along the lines of like, how do you think as the interviewer think that my skills align to this position? And then that shifts their train of thought into thinking, oh, well, I think you're doing great. I think blah, blah, blah. Or they'll start saying things like, I just think you need a little more of this. And you start to get a feel of how it went and whether or not they're thinking whether or not you're a good fit.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, the most of the time, interviews are decided within the first 5 minutes.
Oh, yeah, 100%.
You're going to go in, you're going to talk to someone, you're going to determine whether or not they have what it takes just based on the first couple of questions that they answer. And
or comments, like how you introduce yourself or talk about your background.
Yeah, how you carry yourself, what words you use. Like you have to study a lot on just like presenting yourself and how you can communicate.
Sell yourself, basically.
That's a key point that you bring up because it doesn't matter any of these two interview styles, the pool style, the individual style. You are selling a product.
Yourself.
And it's you.
Yep.
They're hiring someone? No. They are buying a skill that they are expecting you to perform at.
Yeah.
So know how to sell that skill.
Yep. That's super important.
So Melanie, I hope we hope we were able to help you out in this particular scenario, but just know it's a multi-dimensional problem to getting this interview and getting a job. So we hope that everything that we were able to provide helps out. And I mean, we look forward to being able to help out more of our listeners and more of our viewers. So if you guys have any other questions or any other topics, go ahead and leave it in the comments. Make sure to like and subscribe and hit that notification bell.
Yep.
All right, guys, our baby's getting a little fuzzy. So thank you for joining us at this episode of the Partner Up Podcast. I'm Sergio.
And I'm Kimberly.
See you guys next time.
Bye.
Bye.